In this video, we're going to make a start on the fuel tank. Okay, so I've done a bit of work already. What I've actually done is cleaned up the fuel tank. I used the high pressure gurney just to spray water in there, clean that all up. And the other thing I did as well was I had issues with the drain plug down the bottom. So there's the drain plug here. I tried to actually undo the grub screw. That is just here, so the grub screw wouldn't come out. And then what actually eventually happened is that whole piece just came straight off because it's soldered on. I tried my best attempt to actually re-solder that on there, but unfortunately the equipment I've got, whether it's the flux I'm using, I'm just not too sure, I just could not get it to hold. So I had to end up just paying a radiator specialist. They were able to braze that back on. And now when the tank's filled up, I just did a test fill up with just water. There's no leaks at all. So everything is good with that. Alright, that location there, that's where the sender sits in for the fuel level, for the fuel gauge. And then internally, there's a few things that are happening here too. So on the actual the fuel line, so this is the outlet here. On the other end of that, it has this little small filter, and then that sort of sits right into the bottom of the tank. The other pieces of equipment are this actual the sender for the fuel gauge to tell the gauge what the actual level is. The other parts of equipment that come with this tank are, it's kind of like a pre-filter. So if you're filling, because obviously the size of the fuel hole here is pretty large, so if you drop anything in, it goes into this tube. It's sitting over on one of the shelves, so I'll go and grab that in a second. These bits of felt, they sort of stick here. That's just to stop any vibration. What else have we got here? That's just the rubber seal for the sender, and that needs to be replaced. It's very hard and brittle. And the other bit of equipment is the actual lid for the fuel tank. It's not the best quality, but I'll see what I can do to clean that up, sandblast it, possibly zinc coat that again. There's a few dents in the top here, so it isn't perfect. Alright, so the main job I want to work on first is the actual the fuel gauge sender unit. Just test that, see if it works. There's a bit of rust on here, so it needs to be cleaned up, possibly re-zinc coated as well. Alright, so what I've got here is the actual speedometer unit. That you saw me sandblasting, but I don't think you saw me paint that. That's done in the birch silver colour, so that's the original colour for the dash pieces. It's the same colour as the wheels as well. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is, on the actual regulator, we need to give that 12 volts, because the way the fuel gauge works, it runs on 10 volts, sorry, off that voltage regulator. So I just have to remember which connections were which. Alright, so let's get this connected up. So on the back of that voltage regulator, the B, you got a B and an I. B is battery, I is indicator, I'm guessing. So we'll put the 12 volt supply on there. I just need to try and get it so it grips it nicely. Now with the ground connector, the actual assembly itself is going to need a ground. So if I just clamp it onto here for now, that should be okay. We'll also then need another grounding wire, which will lead to, or if I just connect that one to there, it's also got to go to the fuel sender. So we'll just put it to one terminal on there. And then the other terminal goes from this regulator, so the eye connector on the regulator, to one side of the gauge. So the fuel gauge is down the bottom, and then from the fuel gauge, the other side, or the other terminal, that should run to the fuel sender, fuel level sender. All right, so I'll power that up and then just see what happens. I'll just try and turn things around so we can see the gauge. All right, let's give that some power, and then we'll check it out and see what's happening. All right, so first of all, just need to make sure that power supply is on. So this particular power supply, I can dial in the exact voltage I want. So it needs 12 volts because the regulator cuts it down to 10. Just turn that on and see how we go, and see if the fuel gauge moves at all. So where it is at the moment, the position of this sender, that position would be if the tank was in fact empty. So I'm just going to rise it up a bit, and then we'll just see, make it completely full. You can see that the fuel gauge is now moving up. We might be lucky and this actually just works well, but I'll still clean it all up and probably disassemble it. So we just want to get that fuel gauge to read on the full side of things. It's a little bit before the full line, so giving this a clean up might help. So now let's just bring it halfway, and I'll just lay it down so I don't have to keep holding it. And then we'll just see if that needle will drop to halfway. So it's starting to move down now. Yeah, it's sort of sitting around the halfway position, and then just down to a quarter. All right, that's dropping off. All right, so if we give this a clean up, it might improve the accuracy a bit better. But how it is now, it is functioning okay. All right, I'll switch off the power supply, and then that gauge should drop back down to empty. All right. All right, let's get started on taking this sender unit apart. So first thing I want to do is we could probably disconnect this float. One thing I need to do is just test to make sure that this float does not leak. So we'll just disconnect that. So pretty much the wire at the end there sort of just holds it in place. Okay, now on this actual unit itself, the way that it's sort of held together, this piece of metal looks like it's just held in place by these tabs which fold over. So we'll try and lever them up. We just need to be careful that we don't damage any of them. We just want to lever them up a bit, then I'll just use a pair of probably a pair of pliers to bend them straight. And ones down this end are a little bit rusty. It's actually the cover itself. Okay, so now with a pair of pliers, we'll try and see what we can do. Okay, there we go. I'll just try and keep that as it is for now. We'll just have a look at this. So there's with these sender units, there's two different sort of ways that they're usually manufactured. You'll either have a section inside with a coil of wire. So in the way it works, kind of like a rheostat. And then the other sort is one where it has like a bimetallic strip. So all of this material inside there is all, looks like it's all rust. You just need to get all of that out of it. And just clean it up and just make sure it's intact. Okay, now this actual piece here, I'm just trying to lift it over. You can see there's a metal contact here that touches over on this strip over here. And there's a connecting wire from the center, and it's sort of soldered onto that point there. So if I just move that to the side for now, so I can just work on one bit at a time, and then I'll just give this a bit of a clean up. Alright, so let's take a look at this. So on this part here, which has the coil of wire, one end of it, it's a very thin wire. One end of it is fixed to here. That looks like it can come out. I'll try and use a soldering iron on that just to loosen that bit of wire there. There's a metal clip here, which I just tried to bend up a bit. It does start to bend. I did it with a screwdriver. And then there's another metal tab here. Again, this one is pretty rusted. So the first thing I want to do is I'll try and bend up this metal tab, because they sort of just hold the whole thing in place. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we've removed that piece with the coil on it, and we can start cleaning this up. There's a piece of plastic under there to insulate things. Take that out, and now we're just left with the actual main body now, that big chunk of metal. So this we can probably put into the sandblaster. So media blast it, and then it would be ideal to zinc coat this, because the rust hopefully isn't too bad down here. Like, a lot of it is flaky, but it shouldn't affect how it works anyway. Alright, so let's take a look at what we can do with this piece. We need to ideally disconnect that wire. It seems like it's, I can't tell if it's soldered in or just crimped in. But let me just see what happens when we give it a bit of heat. Okay, so I've got these parts media blasted and then zinc coated. The quality, the finish isn't that perfect, but it is good enough for what it is. The thing with zinc coating, you've got to get the current correct when you're putting it in the electrolyte, doing the process, and the ampage as well. Yeah, make sure the ampage is correct. Temperature of the solution. There's a few factors, and how clean the metal is as well. It's a bit pitted on some parts of there where that rust was deep, so it's not fantastic, but it's good enough. All right, so what I need to do now is on this actual piece here, where you got the thin nichrome wire, and that the way I'm going to do this is I'll solder a bit of wire onto the terminals first where they need to connect to, and then connect that strand onto there. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So I'll give that a try and then just see how it works out. All right, so what I've got done now is I soldered a bit of copper wire onto that terminal and then wrapped it around that end piece of the nichrome wire. And then what I need to do now is attach the actual arm. I had to resolder that wire onto there. And then we just need to insert this. I might just sort of bend that tab connector up a bit just so to make sure it makes a good connection with that strip in there. And then I think we are nearly ready to get that into position. Just make sure I got this all correct. I can feel that like it's making good contact inside. All right, and then we just need to that's good. All right, so we just need to fold over these little tabs. I just need a larger pair of pliers to do that. Okay, so we've got it connected back up to the power again and the setup. So the position of this, the lever, it's at the halfway point. It's actually, I would say it's sort of dead on halfway here, but then the gauge sort of reads a bit lower. That's probably a good thing anyway. Bring it all the way up to nearly full, so a little bit before full. We'll just watch where that heads up to. Sort of moves a bit slow, but it's designed to do that because in the actual fuel tank, the fuel doesn't sit still. Even with the baffles in there, it still moves around a bit, and then that will be moving up and down. But it kind of sort of displays the average fuel level because of the time delay it takes for that needle to move. So that's approaching the full bar. If I just push it all the way up. It's crossing right over onto that full mark. Let's just try the opposite direction, bring it down to maybe a quarter of a tank, or a bit less than a quarter. We'll just watch that drop down. So it appears to be working as good as it needs to. All right, so hopefully you've been able to see how to pull one of these apart, what it's like inside. Just one bit of advice, you can't actually buy these units anymore, so you have to sort of overhaul them to reuse them. The internal card with all the coils on it, the nichrome wire coils, you can actually purchase a new sender unit for a Mini and then get that same piece out of it, but you have to do your research and select the right one. I've just got another sender unit here. I think you might have seen this when I was working on the gauges. I haven't taken this one apart, but I would believe the actual internals are different to this one. So you need to make sure you purchase the right sender for a Mini. I just don't want to go to the effort of pulling this one apart because this actually does work and function. All right, I'll leave it there, and thanks for watching my videos.